people might think, well, what's dyslexia got to do with refereeing? But a big part of it is administration. ADHD, we talk about inattentive, but when your need is to be focused on every action in the game, that can be very difficult. How do you manage that situation? What do you use to develop those strategies? How can you work with people to get them on side, to see what you're trying to do as a referee, to see you're not trying to kill the game as a referee, but you're actually wanting to promote it and allow the players to express themselves and do all the great things that people actually pay money to watch football for. The only way I can describe it is it's like putting your hand into a bucket of smashed glass. It's just very, very, very painful. It's like you're being stabbed in the hands. I think you're referring to the fact that I was born in the wrong country, aren't you, David?
English winters.
Well, yes, exactly. English winters and English winters in the northeast. Very, very difficult.
Hi there, welcome to the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with your host, David Charlton. Today, I'm joined by my good friend, Nathan Sherratt. Nathan's been on the podcast before. He's a returning guest, and we're going to talk about something a little bit different to what we have done in the past today. Firstly, though, I'll get Nathan to just explain a little bit more around his background, and then we'll dive into the good stuff.
Hi, David. Thanks. It's great to be back and to join you again and to see you again. But so my role now is I still run my business, The Third Team, which if people heard the first time I was on a number of years ago, they'd know all about, where I coach match officials of all levels from grassroots to semi-professional to elite level around the sort of performance and mental side of the game. My other big part of the work that I do these days is workplace strategy coaching and group coaching as well around neurodiversity. And I've worked with doctors and consultants in the NHS, members of staff at the BBC, people who are working for the big four financial firms, and other people in various different professions, such as university professors and so on.
Okay, so neurodiversity, that's obviously going to be where we're going to take this. Thanks for introducing that into the conversation here. So yourself, you're on the autistic spectrum, and you were diagnosed in your late teens. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I was about 13 or 14 when it came about, and it came about as a result of me struggling a lot at school. I went to a very high performance school in terms of it was a school that was sort of number one state school in the country at the time, but the pitfalls of that were that it was all about high achievers and not necessarily about people who had special educational needs like myself. So what I needed to do was to get a diagnosis, to put some things in place so that I could get support around rapidly upcoming at the time GCSEs.
And when you look at it now, I suppose was a diagnosis helpful? And I guess how does it go on to like influence your day-to-day life right now before we get into the refereeing aspect?
Yeah, it was really difficult. I think it was a funny thing. I think at the start of it, it didn't mean a lot to me because there wasn't a situation where it was explained or anything like that. And really, my education on it began when I started in self-employment, which is a period, obviously, that you and I know well from working together at that time. That was when I really started to invest in knowing about what it was, what impacted me, how I'd been impacted. So really, we talk about the official diagnosis coming, around sort of 13, 14, 15 years of age. But really, for me, it was in me early 20s, really, that I actually started to understand what it really meant and the ramifications and implications of that. And just looking, I think, at how it had affected me. And I think that I don't know whether I've plateaued in terms of how I'm affected. What I find now in the work that I do actually is that when we talk about the traits of neurodiversity, they can change a lot as we age. Particularly, a really good example of that would be when women go through the menopause. Their neurodiverse traits change and come to the fore certainly a lot more. So I think that's a massive consideration that I see with clients now that I work with. So. But I do feel that for myself, I've probably plateaued a lot at the moment, and I know that it's for me, still the different environments, the new environments, the ones where there's a lot of variables that are unknown that can really destabilize me a lot. And I always feel that's my biggest challenge around sort of autism in me at the moment. But as we always say, when you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person, and everybody's impacted in a totally unique way.
Most definitely. Can I take you back to those years and where you talk about the early 20s and setting up and starting your own business and work, and when you look at that period, how did it influence and affect you?
It was so weird because I had a really bad experience at university in me late teens, and I still didn't really have an awareness of autism at that time and what it really was for me. I just thought I was an incredibly anxious person. And then I did a lot of volunteering for sort of about 14 months or so before I got a job. And I picked a really, really sort of toxic environment to go into, where it was a very macho culture, very backward in thinking, and just was totally the wrong type of business for me. And it was a funny thing because I'd waited 14 months and I was offered two jobs, and one could argue that I made the wrong choice. But I think in reality, it's led to me to where I am now, and I think that being self-employed is the best thing for me because of the fact that I'm in control of the structure of the days and things like that. So I think it's a really good thing for me. But yeah, I think looking at that and being aware of that at that time, it was just constant change, constant uncertainty. Having left that job after 7 weeks, 6 months later, I obviously you and I had been introduced to each other prior to that, and I came to you with an idea, knowing that you were doing some work with neurodivergent people at the time, and basically said, how can I make this into a business? And obviously, for the benefit of the listeners, you and I worked through a process, and we were supported by like a supported employment agency, and they managed a lot of the sort of funding that we needed to try and get this thing off the ground. And it became obviously very difficult in periods because marketing a business and all of those things were very, very challenging. And I think a lot of the change and that was going on at that time, where he was setting up a business and finding a new way of working, and a way of working where you weren't in a conventional employment situation. So like obviously working with yourself, you probably had a big part to play in making me accountable for what I was doing with my time. And I think looking at those things, they are the big challenges. And that change and that way of going about it it lacked structure, but it also gave me my own structure, so it was a good thing. It was very much a double-edged sword in that respect around that time of setting up the business.
So a couple of things I'm picking up here is sort of structure, and you being able to create your own structure sounds like it was important. The accountability piece was a big thing there. And then something you mentioned there about change and and unpredictability, was difficult. So yeah, football football is unpredictable. It
So
can be
unpredictable.
freezing cold, as you well know, in the winter. It can be hot in the summer.
Yeah.
You can get shouted at quite a lot, and
Yeah.
and that's being polite.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, tell me more about that, because obviously you're a referee, and how those traits intertwine there.
Yeah, I think it was a bit of a strange one for me. What goes alongside my autism is dyspraxia, and that prevented me from ever being a high quality player. And so I think the experiences that I'd had as a very young child, probably in and around either side the age of 10, where I was signed to a football team but didn't get on by the end of it because of the lack of ability that I possessed. I think that turned me off football for a long time, and I started playing golf on a Saturday rather than football on a Saturday, when I was in my right early teens, 11, 12, 13, 14 years of age. And then I was at secondary school, and a good pal of mine now who sadly moved to Australia, so don't see him as much anymore. He said to me, his dad was a referee at a good level in sort of the top end of non-league, and he just said to me, "Look, I'm doing the course. Do you want to do it?" And for me, it was infinitely preferable to go and get a paper round or working in the shop or whatever. And that was where it really started. And I sort of had a real sort of difference at that point where I was doing a lot of youth football, and that was right up till university. And then when I came back from university, I was offered the chance to become an assistant in a semi-professional level. And that was where my sort of idea of starting taking it seriously came in. And I think that this is where the autism kind of helps a little bit, because when I started working with really good referees, what I was able to do is observe them and watch how they managed situations and how they communicated with people and everything that goes into it, decision making, and you can ask them questions and everything. And that helped me a lot because I learned an awful lot from all the different people I was working with and getting lots of different ideas about how to manage games of football and stuff like that. So for me, it was a lot about learning from the environment that I was in, and that's made me immeasurably better. And it's taken me sort of to the level where I'm probably now, even though I'm still under 30, one of the most sort of experienced assistants in this supply league that I operate on, and I'm happy at the level that I'm at, and I don't want to climb the ladder any further because we touched on it at the start there, self-employment and the fact that there's a lot of travel involved when you go to the higher levels, and it means a lot of days away from working, and when you're not employed, you're not making money for not being there. And it's got me to a place where I'm actually quite happy with what I'm doing and don't really want to push on anymore, but I'm actually operating at a really good level that gives me a lot of variety, go to a lot of different grounds with really full crowds. This season just gone, I've refereed in front of sort of 700 in games, which is really good. And so I enjoy that side of it, but working with the people and learning from them and observing and watching has been a big part of what's helped me to manage situations a lot better.
So when you think about the autistic traits that you may possess, how do you think it's given you an edge as a referee? Like, is there any little superpower there at all?
Yeah, well, as you know, we've said, well, I've probably said this many times to you privately. I'm not a big believer in the superpower thing. I think it's a bit of a myth, and I think, and I'm not criticizing you for asking the question. I think it's a great question because a lot of people think it, but I think it's quite unhelpful. I think it is quite unhelpful for autistic people to think about having a superpower, because there's a lot that are a total loss really as to what their superpower is, and it can affect them. I would say that in the context of refereeing, for me, where I find it really helpful is I probably don't get as emotionally involved in what we say as some of the unhelpful, unkind comments from players. Some people call it abuse, which is what it probably is. But yeah, I don't generally tend to take it to heart. And it's a bit of an odd thing, actually, because when I'm on the pitch, I'm really focused and I don't take it to heart. I think if you said it to me on the street, I think it would really hurt me. But I think that, it gives me a focus, and I'm so sort of committed to making the next decision that I don't let those things, get into my head.
So I guess if it was the player, players can get influenced by their teammates, by their coaches, by their opponents. They can place their focus in completely the wrong way. As you say there, it actually enhances your focus there. What was I going to say here? I had a really good question there to follow up on that, and I've gone in there, blown it. So yeah, you mentioned in there you're not going to you don't necessarily get like emotionally involved there. So I suppose on that note, when it comes down to your decision making, and when you look at refereeing in general, there must be like an unconscious bias that takes place sometimes. Like the player's just irritating and irritating and irritating,
Yeah.
do you not get affected by that so much? Whereas maybe, I don't know, arguably some other referees would do.
It's possible. It's possible. I think one of the things that I've been able to develop is I think I've actually developed a grey area, and so a lot of people talk about autistic people being very black and white in their thinking, and I think that I've developed a bit of a grey area as well. So I think that when I started, we talk about that period when I started working with better referees on a regular basis, I will probably stand there on the line and be thinking to myself, why on earth are they doing that? That's that, and you should give that. But it's actually what I've learned a lot is about that grey area, about the management of things. How do you manage that situation? What do you use to develop those strategies? How can you work with people to get them on side, to see what you're trying to do as a referee, to see that you're not trying to kill the game as a referee, but you're actually wanting to promote it and allow the players to express themselves and do all the great things that you know people actually pay money to watch football for. They don't come to watch referees, they come to watch the players and skill. And how do you enable that? So I think that, probably a number of years ago, I was a lot more letter of the law, and that was the literal side and the black and white thinking of being an autistic person. But I think that, as I say, observing and watching people and understanding their management of games has given me a lot more of a grey area. But to answer your question about difficult players, this is where it comes in for me, you see. I still feel like I've got both sort of tools at my disposal, really. If somebody is being a pain in the ass, I can go letter of the law. But if I can see that it's perhaps a careless challenge bordering on the reckless, I can maybe go on the careless side, and careless is more of a public rebuke, as the FA would like it to be known, rather than a reckless challenge being a caution. And so you can err on that side. And then when an observer comes in and says, why have you done that? Well, okay, I will say, I want to manage the game, take a stepped approach, and not end up with loads of cards and have people sent off and ruin the game and make it all about me and become a target, put a target on my own back.
I'm going to bring mental toughness into this. So we're both mental toughness practitioners, and a couple of things spring to mind. You've got the emotional control element to it here. Going to be a key thing. And then the other one I would say is the interpersonal confidence, being able to your communication, being able to assert yourself. And by the sounds of it, marrying those two up together is such a such a big skill for a referee. And I guess the managing the game, the communication aspect for you, if you've taken it to a new level, maybe to where you were a few years ago.
Absolutely, I definitely would agree with that. I think I'm one of these people who just has that belief. You never stop learning. You always see something different, and you're impressed by something new all the way through. And I've worked with a lot of referees. Some of the referees I've worked with now are in the professional game, and sometimes there's reasons for that. Other times there's real genuine ability as well that you can just see shining out, and having the opportunity to work with those people and learn from them, and still be able to talk to them, by the way, that's a massive thing as well. If they move on levels and you're not working with them anymore, having their number in your phone is still unbelievably valuable.
I think that's the key, isn't it? It's being open-minded, isn't it? And being able to reach out to people and network in that way is so important. You never stop learning at the end of the day. Going back to the unpredictable nature then of football, I'm intrigued by the sensory challenges that might take place for you. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the fact that I was born in the wrong country, aren't you, David? Yeah,
The English winters.
well, yes, exactly. English winters and English winters in the northeast. Very, very difficult. But I think actually, in all fairness, in recent times, I've managed to really get a lid on it. And the most crazy thing is I've tried, Lord knows how many sort of different ways to keep myself warm and stuff. And in the end, it was a £1.50 pair of gloves from Boys that has managed to actually keep my hands warm in the winter when I'm refereeing. So it's been quite amazing in that regard that you can throw as much cash at it as you want actually sometimes the solution's staring you in the face. But yeah, I'm quite regimented, so I wear like an extra pair of socks under me, football socks when I'm refereeing. I wear gloves when I'm refereeing in the winter. Um, and yeah, it's tricky. There's no doubt. I really do struggle with the cold in a big way. It causes me a lot of physical pain. And I think that I feel that as as part of the sensory sort of needs that I have is that I've got Raynaud's, and the actual sensation, I find it very physically painful. It's like the only way I can describe it is it's like putting your hand into a bucket of smashed glass. It's just very painful. It's like you're being stabbed in the hands constantly, and it affects. I alluded to it earlier with the dyspraxia. I don't have the best fine motor skills as it is, but it affects me fine motor skills even more greatly, to the point where I can't do things like tie shoelaces when my hands are cold and stuff like that. So it's a big challenge for me. Yeah, absolutely.
Can that influence the story you tell yourself about the upcoming game at all? And or have you learned to be able to deal with that?
Yeah, definitely learned. I think probably, I've alluded to it a little bit in this podcast, but at the time when we were working closely together, that was still a very big challenge for me, and one that I probably hadn't overcome. I think that now I've got a better confidence to deal with it, and I've developed a lot since that time, and I think that that's part of the reason why through my business I'm looking to do more work with the FA around kind of developing an understanding and appreciation of autism and ADHD and dyslexia, because they all have a massive impact. People might think, well, what's dyslexia got to do with refereeing? But a big part of it is administration. ADHD, we talk about inattentive, but when your need is to be focused on, every action in the game, that can be very difficult. So I think that's why I'm trying to do that. And when the way it applies to probably me is the fact that what I want to do is normalize the fact that some autistic referees can do a great job, but they might need to wear a headband to cover their head to keep them warm in colder conditions, which I've never had to do, but there's been a couple of times where I've been pretty close to doing it. And yeah, and the gloves and stuff like that. I think trying to normalize these things and understanding that as long as they've got the kit on and the kit's outwardly visible, then if it makes them feel comfortable to do the job, what's the problem?
And I guess, we're just talking about the cold here, or it could be the heat, or it was a different country, but the other sensory things that could be going on. The wind could be howling.
Yeah.
New environment, a lot of noise, whether it's shouting, abuse, all of that sort of stuff. Being able to put that to one side, because everybody's a little bit different, aren't they, in that respect?
Yeah. I did a game. It was I was appointed to a county cup final, and it was in a place where, if people know the Northeast, it was in a place called Consett, which, as people know the Northeast, know Consett, it is the highest, most exposed place in the region, I would argue. And so on a winter day, you don't want to be up there. It's summer in Consett. When it reaches 10 degrees, it's really quite a cold place. And I went up there, and it was a bit chilly, but it was getting towards the end of the season, but it was still March, and it was an evening game. And so there was two parts of what you just described at play there. The fact that it was an evening game, so it was getting cold, so I actually put gloves on. But also, it was the first time I'd refereed in front of a crowd of over sort of 900, getting on for 1,000, and I'd not been used to refereeing a game and looking out to the side and seeing a crowd 3 and 4 deep. And I think the noise that they generate, when you're not used to that, and you can hear it, and it impacts your focus on decisions. It impacts the way you communicate with players as well, because you can't just talk to them. You have to sometimes shout to them, even if they're only 15 or 20 yards away, because of how the crowd is singing and making noise and stuff like that. And so that opened me up a lot. I think the other experience which I've had, which might be really an interesting one and a bit of maybe an exclusive for you as well, because I haven't talked about this very much. And I think it's something that needs to be spoken about when we're talking about neurodivergent officials making it into the professional game. I've done one or two games over the past few seasons, friendlies and competitive youth games and stuff with professional referees who operate in the Championship and in the Premier League. And I've been on the line to them. And in those games, we've used the comms kits. And when I've been the AR1 who is in front of the dugouts, I found it really difficult because you'll have club officials trying to talk to you, but you can still hear what's going on in your earphone, and having those two conversations going on at once. Many times I've just ignored these people. So I know that if I ever did, want to go to that level and progress and be involved in football at a level where the comms kits were being used all the time, I could never be the senior assistant referee because I could never manage the two conversations at once. It's easier with the players when you're AR2 because they're in front of you. So you can always talk to them, when they're talking to you. But sometimes you'll get people trying to talk to you from the side. And for me, the most awkward part of it as well is that the advice you get given about the comms kit is put it in the ear you would naturally speak to somebody on the phone with. So for me, that's my left side. And obviously, they're always going to be on my left, the club officials. So it makes it really difficult. And that's something that I think is going to have to be a consideration for people at the upper echelons of the game at some stage. If we're talking about autistic match officials, how are they going to deal with trying to manage those two conversations at once, which is quite a difficult balancing act.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. That does. I'm going to take you back a little bit, 10 minutes or so. You mentioned about golf. I'm guessing golf and like other things that you do are important to you in order to switch off, to be able to recharge the batteries. I suppose self-care is the big one here, isn't it? Do you want to just talk a little bit about that, just so you can perform at your best ultimately?
Yeah, it's a tricky one really because I kind of find it quite challenging actually, the whole process now. So I've got into a really sort of regular routine really, but I'm not strict with it, which I should be, and I know I should be. And the routine is one of that probably I need to take a break every 6 to 8 weeks from work because the nature of the work that I do, and sometimes they're not listening in, but sometimes my fiance will be in the next room and for 5 or 10 minutes, and then an hour later when I come out the meeting, she'll say, "How do you deal with those people?" and stuff like that. And it makes you acutely aware of the fact that a lot of people are dumping their problems on you in the type of work that I do, and so I need to make sure that I'm recovering at that so I can be at my best when I work with my clients and when I referee. And you've got to think about the impact of refereeing as well. Obviously I've actually had 2 months off this year from refereeing in between seasons, and you get your Saturdays back. But from basically a week from now, when we're speaking at the end of June, start of July, Saturdays are going to be gone again, and it's going to be time for football. And so getting that right is really important. Last year, I did a 59-mile charity walk for the charity that I'm vice chair of trustees for, which is Daisy Chain, which is a neurodiversity charity in the Tees Valley. And obviously doing this walk, doing a lot of training and stuff like that, it really gave me the bug for walking. So that was something that I never really used to do. And now I walk, quite considerable distances. Just yesterday, I think I was saying before we started recording, just yesterday, I walked 9 miles. And it gives me a lot of flexibility to do that as well, the job that I do. So, yeah, I really enjoy that. Really enjoyed, doing that. And golf is my summer sport as well, which is great. I totally admit I'm a fair weather golfer. You'll never see me on a course in December, but I do really really enjoy that as well. And I think that one of the learnings I've had this year is that it's taken me quite a long time to be able to actually get round the course again. And that comes again, I think, from the dyspraxia of learning a routine as to how to hit the ball and stuff like that. And I think I let it run for a bit too long. So that's something that I need to be aware of. Is as soon as the clocks start to change, because I didn't play my first golf until June this year. So I need to be playing golf from like April onwards if I can, in order to try and get the best out of myself as well. Because I think it's a bit of a balancing act, golf. It massively charges up, and I really enjoy it. But it's actually deeply frustrating if I'm, losing 5 balls around and stuff like that. So, yeah, I accept that at the start of every year, I'm probably going to have 2 or 3 rounds where I lose a lot of balls, but I've got to then kick on and get my rhythm and my routine back. So, yeah, when it goes well, I'm all right. Yeah.
Yeah, you're not the only golfer who would say that about it being frustrating.
Yeah.
Especially when the balls are yeah, going in the rough and the water and the bunker and so on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think what I'm hearing there though would be, yeah, that like that routine element. It just takes a little bit of time to be able to pick that up along the way. So yeah, something you touched on before we went down that rabbit hole about self-care was doing a little bit of work with the FA, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about football and maybe even sport in general, and how governing bodies can help people like understand neurodiversity better, and potentially in this case, referees and umpires, players. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think you've sort of hit it there a little bit. I think that a lot of the governing bodies are doing really well, but I think where they're not doing well is for the officials. So what we're talking about here is like the FA. So I'm working with the FA on this project at the moment, but I thought that their resources around neurodiversity were exemplary, actually. But I felt it was only really applicable to coaches and players. And I felt that referees had been left behind, which a lot of referees will say that's typical. Referees are always left behind. They're always the last ones to be thought of. It's a nightmare. That's the view of many referees. But I don't necessarily see it that way. I think you just have to do the right thing, which is to talk to the governing body and to say, I think you've got some great stuff going on, but actually we as a group who are also really big participants in the game, we're not quite covered in that. So can you, give us a bit of a, give us some more resources and stuff like that? And then I think more often than not, they are. And, I can talk about it from a football perspective because I'm involved, but I'm not really involved with any governing bodies in any other sports. I've done work for them, but I wouldn't know them intimately, and I'm not involved in any role with them. I just think it's really, really important to analyse, the fact that in many areas of the country, you've got a 3, 4, 5 year waiting list for diagnoses of many neurodiverse conditions. So the number of neurodivergent people in 12 months, 24 months, 36 months time is going to be dramatically higher than it is today. And I just think that to invest in that and to put effort and time and look into that is future proofing your sport, really. And that's kind of the way that I've sort of looked at it.
Yeah, it makes sense because we're thinking about football and referees here. Without a referee, there's no matches at the end of the
Exactly.
day, and
Yeah.
it's a challenging role because of the amount of stick that you guys get. So I suppose the more support, guidance, and things like that are going to encourage a range of different people into that role is vital. And yeah, that would be the same for cricket, for rugby, for other sports, I'm sure as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you have to give tremendous credit as well to the FA, by the way, for the fact that prior to the pandemic, there were somewhere in the region of 27, 28,000 referees, and it dropped, I think, to nearly 20,000 during the pandemic. And they're now well over, I think they're near 35,000 now, which is fantastic, a total recovery. And so I just think that when you look at a referee workforce increasing at that level, when you think about 1 in 100 people being autistic, I'm not very good at maths, David, but if you do the maths, you'll see there's a lot of autistic, ADHD, whatever referees going to be amongst that group of 35,000. So it's a growing number.
That's great news. Obviously, the FA are doing something right in that respect, aren't they? If that is the case, in order to grow to that level.
Mm.
So yeah, look, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. We've gone off different rabbit holes, and it's been really interesting. I'm curious then, what are 3 takeaways from what we've talked about here, do you think?
Well, I think this is a question that I kind of knew was coming, but also I didn't know how the flow of the conversation would go. I think that for me, it's about understanding probably a bit about what people would like to take away. Is if you're a referee, neurodivergent referee, listen to this. How do you develop as a match official? I think it's about, my big message would be about, listen to guys that you get fortunate enough to work with, take on board the way that they manage situations, and try and learn from that, and then obviously try and understand about the management side of things as well. How do you actually, develop a grey area? Like I developed a grey area from starting as a very black and white referee who was quite letter of the laws of the game, to going to somebody who can manage matches really quite well. Think about that. I think probably another takeaway really would be to look at kind of thinking, I suppose, a bit about the early part of your journey when you're freshly diagnosed. That there's still a lot of work that you can do after that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, just because you're diagnosed and you walk away without having all the information that you maybe would like, it doesn't mean that that's the end of the road for you. You still can learn more about yourself and learn more about your neurodiversity. And probably the third thing that I would say out of it all is just be open and be curious to what opportunities lie ahead. The path is never a straight one, and you just have to be open to taking opportunities and grabbing things as they come.
One of the things that you mentioned there was two of the things when you talked about the openness. Do you feel that tapping into support, speaking to people has been like really really helpful for you?
Crucial, and I have to pay tribute to you here in saying this, because you give me a tremendous level of support at the start of setting up my business. When you were doing that type of work was massive for me, because it gave me a lot of confidence at the start. I mentioned actually coming to you with the idea, and you going, yeah, okay, we're gonna have to develop this a little bit. But actually, we did that, and when we did that, that was when we really saw the rewards of it. Because when you and I stopped working together on a close basis, there was an established business there for me to build on, and that was what your kind of legacy, if you want to say, was. And so tap into that support in the early days to help you to get to grips with how it can be. Because I think when you have an idea, you don't, and particularly for somebody who is neurodivergent and craves structure, if you can't see how you can make this into a structured thing that'll work, it can be very, very difficult to think you're going to be successful. And so if you can tap into a great support like the support that you gave me, it gives you that confidence and that belief that there's a structure out there that can make your idea into something that can be sustained.
Thank you for the kind words there. Can you just explain a little bit more about other support that you've received, though, that might be helpful as well over over a period of time, more so with the neurodiversity piece?
So for me to run my business, I developed a team, and obviously I've mentioned there you were a big part of the team at the start, and then you came out the team, and I had another coach who I work with now, a guy called Owen Ryan, who's fantastic. But it was funny at the time we parted ways. We described it as a situation where I was a football team, you were the manager, and I was getting a new manager, and under my new manager, a different idea has come about, and that's what's probably led to me going down the road that I've gone down ever since. And I had a really good well-being support, but I've also had really good support with like the parts of doing the business that I wasn't very good at, which was the marketing and communication side. So getting all of those pieces in place to put a team around me has made me feel very, very, successful. And I think you need to have a patient family around you as well. That goes for anybody who's self-employed, by the way, whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent. But I think more when you are neurodivergent, because when you're self-employed, the highs are higher and the lows are lower, and you need people around you to keep you grounded, keep you going, keep you moving. And I think you feel those things more keenly when you're neurodivergent, though. You feel those lows, it feels like the end of the world. And when you get the highs, you feel like you cracked it and you're going to be making a million, and it's fantastic. So I think that having the right support around you is absolutely critical. And there are varying ways in which that can come about. And utilising them all and taking bits from them all is a fantastic way to do things.
Look, Nathan, it's massively inspiring hearing you talk and in the way you are, and to finish on a nice little positive note here as well was something you said a little bit earlier before the interview, was how you felt like you want to be successful, you want to do some great stuff, and clearly obviously the support's helped in that respect, but pat on the back to you as well for pushing through and running with that.
I always wanted to make a difference, David, and I've found a way where I feel like I can actually do that now, and I'm getting the work in, and I'm making a real difference to people. I've kept people in jobs at big organisations like the BBC and the work that I've done, and that's hugely valuable for me. I mentioned in this interview that I couldn't work as a neurodivergent person in a workplace, and I had to leave after 7 weeks, and I was working with a young girl who's a journalist at the BBC, and she first job out of university. So for me, it was my first job when I had that experience. And I think that experience that I'd actually had in my own life gave me a determination to help this, girl to have the career that she'd worked so hard for in her degree. And I think that, having opportunities like that and just using that as an example is what drives me, and the fact that she kept her job and is now working really successfully with the strategies that we put in place and thriving in our role, that's the biggest reward for me. And I think I've always wanted to make a difference. I probably said that to you a million times when we were working together closely. I want to make a positive impact. I don't really know what I want to do or how I want to do it, but I want to make a positive impact. And I think now to be able to do that is massive for me. It's the biggest prize of all.
Brilliant. Well, big well done there. Should the listeners want to reach out to you and pick your brains, where can they find you?
So Nathan Sherratt on LinkedIn is always a great place to get in touch with me. Thirdteam.co.uk has a contact box where you can get in touch and see some of the stuff that's going on with that. The one I would highly recommend is We Are the Third Team on Instagram. There's loads of really great content coming out there. Videos with myself, that 30-second videos with great tips in, and those are probably the best places to get in touch and to reach out, and completely would welcome that.
Excellent. Well, great to see you, great to chat with you again, and big thank you for sharing all of your insights there. This was a really enjoyable conversation again, and also a very valuable conversation, much like last week's with Adam. Keys for me today were that decision makers in sports, coach educators, referee educators, coaches in general, really do need to be open to learn about neurodiversity, about inclusion, about equality. The more we can educate people, the better. The more people ask the question, why, the better too. Why is someone behaving the way they are? So that's right, be curious. Tailor things to suit individual needs, to suit individuals so that they can be better served. Neurodiversity, as Nathan shows, doesn't have to be viewed as a barrier or a problem. With the right support, the right guidance, you can go on to thrive, much like Nathan, who painted a very, very positive picture. So there's a few little bits from me there. I'm off now to enjoy a few holes of golf in the sunshine. I hope you're enjoying the nice weather too, and you go on to have a fantastic week. If you enjoyed this episode of the Demystifying Mental Toughness podcast with David Charlton, do check out my website, sport-excellence.co.uk, and my online sports psychology resources. The Sport Excellence website has essential resources for anyone looking to build their own mental toughness or the mental toughness of their athletes or teams, or if you want to achieve peak performance more often or optimal functioning. The Sport Excellence website has everything you need to keep moving forward and thrive. So go on, head over to sport-excellence.co.uk to find out more.